There is a cardinal in your yard right now who has been lying face down in the grass with his wings spread flat against the ground and his beak open for the last 10 minutes. You have never seen him do this before. He looks exactly like a bird that is about to die. Most people never find out what it actually is. Subscribe to Bird Sense right now. This is exactly the kind of thing we uncover every week. He is not dying. He is doing something that has been happening in your yard for years, without you ever knowing what you are watching and what he is actually doing down there in the dirt. That is what changes everything. To understand what he is actually doing, you have to understand what his feathers need that preening alone cannot provide. You already know that birds preen, that the beak runs through each feather, rezipping the microscopic barbs that keep the flight surface intact. But there is a category of threat to feather integrity that the beak and preen gland oil cannot fully address on their own. Feather lice, feather mites, and the bacteria that colonize feather material in warm conditions. These are not disrupted by mechanical realignment or waterproofing oil. They require something else, which means the cardinal face down in your yard is not sick. He is dealing with a parasite management problem that every feathered creature on the planet has been solving for millions of years. And the solution he is using is not his own. It belongs to the ants. Anting is one of the most well-documented and least understood behaviors in ornithology. The behavior has been observed in over 200 species of birds worldwide, across every continent where both ants and birds coexist. And yet, for most of the 20th century, researchers could not agree on what it was actually for. The cardinal face down in your yard has positioned himself over an active ant colony or a disturbed ant trail. The ants, responding to the intrusion, begin releasing formic acid, the chemical defense mechanism they use against threats. And the cardinal, rather than leaving, spreads his wings flat against the ground and holds still, allowing the ants to move through his feathers and deposit their formic acid directly onto the feather shafts. And the cardinal at your feeder has been doing this in your yard. What the formic acid does to the feather parasites is specific and effective. Research on the antimicrobial and antiparasitic properties of formic acid has documented that the compound is toxic to the feather lice and mites that colonize bird plumage. A bird that regularly ants maintains significantly lower parasite loads than a bird that does not, which means lower feather degradation, better flight surface integrity, and measurably better survival outcomes over time. The cardinal lying face down in your yard is not having a seizure. He is applying medicine. There is a second form of this behavior that most people never notice because it looks nothing like the first. Passive anting, the form most people stumble across, is what you have just described. The bird lies directly on or near an ant colony and allows the ants to do the work. But active anting is something else entirely. In active anting, the bird picks up individual ants with its beak and deliberately wipes them through its own feathers, using the ant's body like a tool to distribute the formic acid to specific areas. But researchers found something they didn't expect. Active anting birds show a strong preference for particular ant species over others. Not all ants produce formic acid in useful concentrations. Some produce none at all. Birds that have been observed actively anting show clear discrimination between ant species, selecting the ones with the highest formic acid output and ignoring or discarding the others. Anting as a documented behavior was first systematically described in the 1930s when ornithologists began cataloging what they initially assumed was aberrant or distressed behavior. It took decades of field observation across multiple continents before the formic acid connection was established. Today, the behavior has been documented in starlings, jays, thrushes, warblers, and over 200 other species. But the Northern Cardinal with its preference for disturbed soil areas near garden edges, is one of the species most commonly encountered, doing it in residential yards, which means the bird you have been watching from your window may have been your best opportunity all along to observe one of the most unusual behaviors in avian biology. This is not random behavior, it is targeted self-medication with a specific active ingredient. Using a selection process that has been refined over millions of years of coevolution between birds and ants, which means the cardinal in your yard is not just lying in the dirt. He is a pharmacist, and the ants are his dispensary. But the formic acid from ants is not the only substance birds have been documented using this way. Field researchers have recorded birds actively applying cigarette butts to their feathers. The nicotine and tar acting as a different class of anti-parasitic compound. Others have been observed using citrus peels, mothballs, and in one documented case, still smoldering embers from a fire. The common thread across all of these is the same. The bird has identified a substance with antiparasitic or antimicrobial properties and is applying it directly to the feather surface using its beak as the delivery mechanism. The ants are simply the most reliable and widely available source of the right chemistry. Your yard, if it has an active ant population, is a pharmacy the cardinal has known about. For longer than you realized, most people spend years watching birds and never know this is what has been happening in their yard every summer. The timing of anting behavior connects directly to what you are most likely to see in your yard and when. Anting occurs most frequently in warm months, late spring through late summer, when both ant activity and feather parasite populations are at their peak. The same conditions that make summer the most demanding period for feather maintenance are the same conditions that drive ants to the surface and make them available as a chemical resource. The behavior also clusters around molt season, the period when birds are replacing their feathers, and the new pin feathers growing in are particularly vulnerable to parasite colonization. A bird in active molt that can access formic acid regularly ends up with a cleaner feather coat than one that cannot. The new feathers start their operational life with lower parasite loads, which means better performance from the first day they are fully grown. And the next time you see a bird lying face down in your yard, and your first instinct is to intervene, know that the most helpful thing you can do is nothing. Watch. Give him the 10 or 15 minutes the session typically runs, and when he suddenly rights himself, shakes out his feathers, and flies off looking completely fine, you will know exactly what just happened. He came to your yard to get what he needed, and your yard had it. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen a bird doing this and thought it was dying? I want to hear about it. I read every single one. Subscribe to Bird Sense, and if you want to understand what else is happening in your yard that most people file under ordinary, that video is right there waiting for you.